Welcome to the Horror Friendly Podcast.
It's not over because that bitch is dead.
Let's delve into that a bit deeper.
I'm going to be like the peacekeeper between you two tonight.
Don't fuck with the original.
Yeah, don't fuck with the original.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Horror Friendly Podcast, part of the You Run Podcast Network. My name is Katie, and I am joined by my wonderful co-host, Chantal. Hi, Chantal.
Hi.
So we're going to be doing something a little different for you guys for the next month or so. We've decided to do a little mini-series covering some of the incredible films showcased at the UK Film Festival FrightFest. We're so excited to introduce you to these films and give you a bit of our insight. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy.
Are we ready for this now that we've hit the record button and Katie has her wine? Are we ready?
So ready?
Okay, so this week we are kicking off with Scopophobia, directed by Aled Owen. So Scopophobia is the extreme irrational fear of being looked at. 4 girls return home to a ghost town but find themselves being followed by someone who knows what they did, or just their guilty conscience. However, there's more to each girl than meets the eye. So, Katie, what did you think of this one?
I enjoyed it, I think, for the most part. Again, like, I feel like I'm saying this with every film, but it wasn't what I expected, but I wasn't really expecting. I don't really know what I was expecting, to be honest, because the description doesn't give a lot away. So it's kind of like, okay, like, what's going to happen here? But I liked it for the most part. I thought the soundtrack was really good. I really liked the title card at the beginning as they drove off. I thought that was really cool. And I think the beginning was really good as well, because it really kind of like, you're immediately kind of like involved in it, and you do pay attention to it immediately. Like it gets you, I think, pretty quickly. Yeah. But overall, I think a pretty decent film. Yeah. What about you?
I actually, do you know what? I think the Welsh accents really made it for me. Like, there was a few points that just, I don't know, some of the lines were just beautifully done in Welsh. I actually really enjoyed this. I think it's almost kind of like slasher territory. And I think there was really something about the 4 girls and their kind of friendship. So like they've all just come back from like uni. I think it was like, yeah, that kind of like studying away. And you could kind of almost, and it sounds really sad, but you can almost see that being like a real friend group. And I think unfortunately it's a very toxic friend group. But I think unfortunately when you're kind of that age, you're friends with people because you went to the same school, because you were in the same circumstances. So you're still kind of like, oh, well, you know, I've known them for so many years, and you don't realize they're toxic. And I think this showed that so well. Like I could literally see this happening. Yeah, I thought I actually found it quite enjoyable as like a not too serious horror. Kind of, you could imagine this almost like pizza party, watching it with some friends and some drinks and just kind of enjoying it.
Yeah, for sure. I think there were a few like quite serious sort of undertones with it as well, though. I think it did have a lot of that. And like you say, it was like these kind of groups of people that have sort of just stayed together because of one situation. And it isn't because at all. It's not at all because they want to, really, apart from maybe 2 of the girls, 2 of the least sort of like toxic girls. Like, yeah, it doesn't feel like a natural friend group at all.
Yeah, not anymore. Like
Not
maybe
anymore.
Yeah, like maybe once, but now they've kind of grown up doing their own thing. Like you would see them drifting. I don't know how obviously so Scopophobia, which I will say correctly. I think that's the thing. It's a really interesting concept of a horror film of like, is somebody actually following me, or do I just feel like somebody's following me? But I don't think they played into it as much as they could have. Like there was definitely points where it's only one of the main characters who has scopophobia. And I feel like they could have definitely had some moments be a bit tenser because of her condition. I can't think of the word. Fear?
Diagnosis. Yeah.
Diagnosis? Yeah, I was trying to think. I was like, what do you call it when it's like a fear? So yeah, I feel like it could have been rammed up a little bit just to make it a little bit tenser. But again, maybe it was originally and they actually brought it down to kind of like make it more fun. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, actually. I felt like that kind of got lost in between everything else because there was
Yeah.
a lot going on in this film and a lot of kind of side plots and just a lot of stuff. And I think also I did really like this about the film, that like each character or each girl in the group had their complete own story and their own like characterizations and their personalities. I thought like there wasn't two of the same, really. They were all kind of different. So alongside of that, like there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I felt like they could have maybe stripped it back a bit more and then just focused on the scopophobia for a bit. I think that would have been, to your point, I think that would have been quite cool, because that maybe would have brought in a few more sort of horror elements. But I think the point of this film was more like, who are the real monsters here kind of thing. It's more about like conflict between people rather than like a masked guy following you around. Like it was more about like real situations.
Yeah. But it is, like you say, I think that is actually a really good point. Like, because how often do you get it where like 4 people have their whole story told? So I do think they did that really well. And then actually there was a 5th character kind of introduced and we learned a lot more about him. But yeah, I just feel like, as you say, like it got lost a bit. And I know it's supposed to be like a character arc and they're, you know, how they cope with situations. But I think just like even like the halfway point, they could have used it a bit more because it is a really interesting concept.
It is.
And also if you really Google it, some of the first pictures that come up are quite terrifying. So.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept and a really cool idea to incorporate in a horror film as well. But I did also like that they kind of did go down like a true crimey sort of thriller route as well.
I'm going to word this funny because again I try not to do spoilers, but I also don't know if we may have to cut this out if there is spoilers. How did you find the ending? Because I once it kind of ended, I wanted more. Like it left me wanting more. Like I wanted to see what happened next. So I was
interesting.
Yeah, I wondered how you felt about that.
I wasn't expecting the ending. The ending I thought was pretty savage. Which hopefully isn't giving too much away.
It's a horror, most endings are savage.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting you wanted more. I kind of felt like all the characters kind of like had their story told. So I felt like there wasn't really anything else to put out there. But yeah, that's interesting that you'd say that you'd want more from it. When we're off camera, I want to know like exactly what you...
As I say, it's not necessarily that I wanted more of like their stories, just kind of like the natural course of like, well, what would happen next? What would the next day look like? The next week? So I was a little bit curious about that because again, it's like,
yeah, okay, fair. Yeah. That makes sense.
But there were some genuine laugh out loud moments here, and it's hard because as you say, there were some very like tense bits. There were some heartfelt bits, and there were some like, oh fuck, and then there was a genuine moment where I just actually laughed out loud like a couple of times, and I was like, this is brilliant. This is a bit of everything, this film.
It was funny because like when I was halfway through the film, I was like, this kind of reminds me of I Know What You Did Last Summer. And then there was a line which was literally like, we are literally in I Know What You Did Last Summer. She says something like that and it's so funny.
Idiot, haven't you seen I Know What You Did Last Summer? But it was almost a little bit self-aware.
Very, yeah. I felt like it was, yeah.
Which I think brings us nicely onto like, who would you recommend it to? Because I was going to say it's kind of giving not quite Scream vibes, but that kind of like self-awareness, almost like a slasher.
Yeah, like I know what you mean.
I would put it in with like slasher fans, I think.
I think so, yeah, because it is still a group of people like who sort of run into a lot of issues and have this kind of deep-rooted secret that they've sort of kept together. And I don't know, because earlier I was obviously saying like thriller and true crime. I think that would also come into it as well, because I do think it is, when I sort of think back, I think there is a bit more of a thriller to it. It's a bit more like you're trying to sort of unravel their story a bit more, and you get to know the girls a lot more along the way. So I would say maybe people that are into kind of thrillers, I would say, I think.
What about you? Yeah, so I'm gonna sit with like thrillers and a little bit like slashes, screams,
Yeah,
like
nice.
sort of, or I know what you did last summer.
Exactly. If you like that, then I think you guys will love this.
And what was your wow moment?
To be fair, this might be a bit of a cop-out response, but I'm gonna say like the cast, the girls. I mean, Aled Jones is in this himself,
Yes.
as the guy, who he's also great. But I actually think the girls, I think they actually worked really well together. I think all of them did a really good job. They did a good job of really acting out their characters, like really being quite unlikable or fairly likable, and I feel like they worked really well together. I think it was really well casted. So I'm going to say the group in general, because I think they must have had some sort of like chemistry beforehand to sort of make that. So yeah, I think they did really well. And it was really nice seeing just like the whole film centered around like a group of like women as well. I thought that was really cool and refreshing to see, because normally with like, as you say, Taylor, like with Scream and stuff, there's normally like guys involved and lots of things, but the main kind of ensemble were women, which I thought was really cool. What about you?
Yeah, no, I was going to say a bit, and it's quite a spoiler. So I'm gonna go with, as you say, like, so it's not too much of a spoiler, but when they sort of first come together and they're all like just sat in the pub, and it is very, and again, like the village you and I went to school in, and we'd go to the pub once we were legal, and it was so funny because it was that kind of very countryside England, countryside Wales pub, and I think they got that absolutely down to a T. And that was so funny how it was just, yeah, we're gonna go out tonight, and then they turn up and there's like four people in the corner, and they're like bringing
So
in
relatable.
like bringing in the big crowds, and I just think that was so perfectly done. And it was, and again, it just felt so real that actually, if that's where you grew up, that was your night out. Like, unless you were going to go, like, I mean, they're in Wales, so what? Jump on, go to Cardiff. I'm not sure whereabouts in Wales they were based. But that's it. Like, you have to kind of make do what you got, and they were making the best of a shit situation. I just think that was perfectly done. That was great.
Yeah, nice. What would you give this Spookies out of 5?
Ooh, I think I'm gonna go 3.5. I did really enjoy it, but it just wasn't one of my favorites that we've had recently. And again, it's really hard because we've had some really good films recently. So again, it's absolutely not that it's bad. 3.5 is great. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna sit it there because again, it's like, yeah, I think it just, I think that feels right. What about you?
Nice. I'm going to say similar. I'm going to say 3 out of 5. Like, solid film. I think it was really well acted. Cool idea for a film. I just think that I think what brings it down for me is there was a tiny bit sort of in the middle that slowed down a bit for me, which did just bring down my overall score, because I felt like it's not a long film by any means, but I just feel like the middle bit ever so slightly dragged a little bit for me, but which I think caused it to bring it down ever so slightly. I think some things could have been sped up a bit, but in general I think it's a solid film, and I think it definitely deserves its place at FrightFest. So
Definitely. Well, check out Aled Owen on Instagram or socials to find out more information about when this film will be coming out. Until then, enjoy.